Deborah Kraft, how are you?
Great, thanks.
Great.
Good to be here, Matt.
I'm really happy you're here too. We've been having a great time. I was like, we got to finally turn on these cameras, chatting about things.
Yeah.
I got connected with you because Chief Rex Ingram from Caldwell Chief of Police contacted me. He was like, hey, you got to get a hold of this woman, Deborah Kraft. And I was like, why? What's Deborah Kraft doing? He's like, well, she's working against like anti-human trafficking. She's working with internet problems. I'm very passionate about that. As we've been talking about, talk to me about your journey and what your organization is doing.
Well, my journey started back in August of 2020. First of all, I was a typical, I don't want to know anything about sex trafficking because it's not happening where I am.
Right.
And so one day I went for a walk with a friend in a park in Caldwell, and we came upon a young woman who was sitting in the middle of the path in great anxiety and looked somewhat emaciated. She was barefoot, and so we asked her if she was okay, and she said no, and we asked her what the problem was. And her response was, today I'm going to die. And we looked around, there was nobody else there. She had no injuries, she wasn't crying out in pain. And as we asked her to explain, she began to talk about dark places and demons and how she hated herself. And so we encouraged her to walk back to the parking lot with us. And when we did, this man jumped out from the other side of the path and claimed to be her friend. And realizing that didn't feel right, ultimately we escorted her back to the parking lot and called in the police and learned that sex trafficking was on the rise in Caldwell, that this scene had the signs of sex trafficking, and that this woman's name had come up in the database of missing persons. So it was a very dramatic walk back, and the conversation we had, we learned that she was from the East Coast. She had been flown to California, met this man in a hotel. She didn't know how long she was in California. Then she was flown to Idaho, and so she started to break down and cry. She said she couldn't talk to her parents anymore. She missed her mom. So anyway, that was my eye opener. And at first, I was just so stunned by the whole experience. It really just stuck in my head. And after a while, I thought, clearly, what's missing is education, if this is that prevalent. And so we got a group, as I talked to more people, we all got together, came on board, and had a meeting, and then planned the very first event for Caldwell in January of 2022. We had the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition come out, and they gave a presentation. And that was the beginning of awareness, I think, in Caldwell in a public sense. Then we had a follow-up with panel discussion with the IATC. We had somebody from a place called Inside Out Cares, and then Officer David Gomez was on that panel, and that was the eye-opener to the internet and the crimes against children on the internet. So from there, we moved on, became an organization. We developed our mission statement. Then we became a 501c3, and we brought programs to the community, and we still are. And so here we are today. We're about, 3.5 years down the road, and it's such a huge problem, and it's so multifaceted. And right now we are focusing on the internet because we know that is one of the primary means by which these predators reach kids at an alarming scale, and there's just a lack of education, and that has to move forward. So that's where a lot of our effort is.
If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio-only platform, please jump down and give it a quick follow and a review. The Ranch Podcast is the only podcast in the state of Idaho that has access to this many Idaho leaders, and your support is greatly appreciated. I did not know that's how you got started. That's absolutely horrific. Mm-hmm. The ability to connect with people that you've never been around, that you've never seen, they can present themselves however they want. Like it's, I had Representative John Schertz on recently, who's a Air Force JAG officer, and he's also a federal prosecutor, and he was telling me about an instance when he was prosecuting a case. This poor girl who's a 7th grader in Eastern Idaho. She was a volleyball player, and she was very innocently posting things online on social media about, like, volleyball tournaments and things like 7th grade style, right? Nothing crazy. Things that any parent would be like, okay, she's not taking her shirt off. Like, she's not dressing provocatively. This is just her at a volleyball tournament. Totally fine. Things like, my friend sends me videos of his daughter playing volleyball, like, slamming it and stuff. It's like, oh, awesome. Like, that's great. Things like that. But as Representative Schertz points out, said, look, you like dogs. If you like dogs and you like looking at dogs, the algorithm's going to give you more dogs. Well, for somebody who's not a great person, and in fact, terrible person who likes looking at 7th grade girls, the algorithm's going to send him more 7th grade girls. And this 7th grade girl had found her way into the feed of some gentleman who I believe was coming out of Michigan. And he connected with her and was able to work a scam on her, do terrible things, extort her and more. And they were ultimately able to extradite him, or not extradite, but get him arrested and transported from Michigan to the state of Idaho to face charges. And just understanding the resources involved in that and how easy it was for this individual to connect with that young girl. I had another case where a friend of mine, his daughter was really good at dancing, right? And there was a scam getting run on them that they ultimately sniffed out. But it was literally a scam where they were going to transport the girl to New York to compete in a dance competition or like do a dance audition kind of thing. And things started feeling not right, and they finally, got the police involved, and they realized that this was a trafficking scam, that they were essentially going to get this girl to be removed from her parents, get her in an audition or something, grab her and gone. Those types of things were not possible before. Now it's like every day you hear about a new one because of the connectivity of people in the world.
That's right. I think the internet, as you and I spoke before, the internet has just caused this problem of victimization and sex trafficking to explode, and it's taken it into a whole new dimension. And I mean literally a new dimension, because the internet is a different dimension. And I think what is missing in terms of education is for adults in particular to understand how dedicated these predators are to victimizing youth, to the point where they take classes in child psychology to understand the child's brain. And law enforcement knows this, and those professionals working in the field know this, that the human brain does not reach full maturation until the mid-20s. And at 18, it's only half developed. And the centers that are last developed are those for emotions and reasoning. So when a teenager suddenly finds themselves victimized by a predator who pulls back the curtain and reveals who they are after they've gotten that first nude and start to extort them, that child cannot think beyond the moment because they're in such a panic. And that can lead to some tragic situations. But these predators know every little trick on how to build that relationship of trust with these kids, to the point where these kids will talk to and confide in the predator before they'll go to their parents, who they may have a great relationship with. So the internet it's a law enforcement, the military, and first responders get training in something called situational awareness. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Yes.
So situational awareness has 5 different color codes. The first is totally relaxed, and you don't have to be aware of anything because you're in the safety of your own home. And home is really the only place you're going to be in a code white, which is what that is. Code yellow is when you are aware but relaxed. And that may be if you're going out and you're on your bicycle riding or going for a walk. Orange is aware and alert that there may be a threat in your presence. Red is when that threat presents itself and you need to act. And black is panic. Now you take that color code system and you superimpose it onto the World Wide Web. When those kids get on the internet, they're not in white, they're not in yellow. At the very least, they're in orange, which is there is a threat that is potentially in front of you. When these predators, when these traffickers lure these kids into a private chat room, they're in code red already. And when that first nude is sent, they're in code black. That's panic. And so it happens so quickly, and it happens so perceptively so smoothly to these kids. They don't even know how they got to where they were, and they can't think. They really can't think once they've been victimized.
Yet the panic, the fight or flight that kicks in for people. And one thing that I tell parents at times is, if you, like, I have kids right now and they don't have tech. They used to, everybody had tech over COVID. And that pre-COVID, they didn't have Chromebooks or iPads or anything. Right. And then over COVID, out of necessity, they had, iPads. And then those kind of hung around for a couple years after until we realized, like, what in the hell are we doing? Like, this is terrible. But what I tell people is, like, listen, when you give your kid a piece of tech, especially when you allow them to go on social media, you have to realize that you are putting your opinion of your kid and your kid's perception of the value within the house at last place. Because if some stranger on the internet who they don't know, who they've never known, who they may never know, tells them they're a terrible person or says horrible things to them, that will mean more to that kid than your opinion of the kid, right? Just get ready for that. And I think we all inherently know this. Like, I post things online all the time because that's the nature of what I do. I make content, we have these conversations, and I present them to the world. Okay, fine. And people all the time who I don't know, who I'll never know, to say all kinds of random things, like horrible things.
Right.
And I was telling my fifth grader the other day, he asked about it. And I said, no, look, man, you can't take it. Like, those aren't even people. And he's like, what do you mean? And we started outlining, which I don't think people do with their kids, or at least I haven't heard of a lot of people doing. It's like, okay, what are all the reasons somebody might write something in the comment section? Okay, it could be a bot. Somebody could be marketing. Somebody could be trying to gain notoriety for themselves. Somebody could be just, they find it entertaining to say, like, the most offensive, ridiculous thing. Like, you can go through about 8 different reasons why somebody would make a comment in your comment section that is bad or negative or whatever. And once you realize that, it's like, wait, there are like 8 reasons somebody might do this. And only one of them is that this person actually believes this. And even with that, do you know the person? Like, what are the odds that this is somebody who actually believes this, that you actually know and value? Like, 0. It's 0. Because, like, somebody you know and actually value will just tell you. Like, if my wife has an opinion about something I do, she just tells me, right? And even I have to do a double take sometimes. I'm like, oh, like, what am I don't care. Like, I don't care. Just either block or delete or just move on with my life. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But that's me as a 42-year-old who is professionally doing this. And for young people, it's impossible. Like, for a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old, not only is it impossible to do that with somebody making a comment, but the fear and anxiety with, I will be exposed. They have a picture of me. They're going to send it to my church group. They're going to do all of these horrible things. They're going to send it to my whole friends list. The opinions of other people are the things that drive suicides and extortions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, one thing we need to keep in mind is that it's built into our youth that they want to be accepted. They want those relationships, and and so the scenes when you see on the internet, we go through in our presentation. We have our own PowerPoint called "Not Our Children," and we break the sextortion process down into 3 phases. And that second phase is when you begin to appreciate the fact that these predators do not view these kids as human beings.
No, they're running the same script. They say the same thing. They give 0 squats about what happens.
They see them as a product,
right.
A product that they ultimately want to own and control and basically enslave. And that's what they're trying to do once they get that first nude. And kids are so, in their innocence and their naivete, they just think they're talking to a wonderful person. And so when parents need to understand that when that kid opens up that internet portal and gets on the internet, they're literally talking to people that could be halfway around the world that are victimizing them. I mean, I'm sure you've read the articles about kids that are victimized. Nigeria was one. The Ivory Coast is one. And just recently, I think it was a a state senator from South Carolina whose son committed suicide because he was victimized by a sexual predator online. They finally brought him in from Nigeria. They were able to extradite him in from Nigeria, and he is now going to be facing life in prison. They had to waive going after the death penalty in order for the Nigerian government to bring him to allow him to be extradited. But these kids are literally talking to people halfway around the world. I mean, when you think about it, one statistic that law enforcement has given us is that at any given moment of every day, there are about 750,000 sexual predators on the internet. They're trolling the internet 24/7 because that's their self-assigned job, and they earn huge bucks doing it. And so there is no escaping it. They're picking these kids off like sitting ducks.
Listen, to that end, I know of an elected official in this state who had a child who got extorted as well. I talked to this person about it. It is a reality that does, like, no one cares. Our kids, when you put a cell phone in their hand, they have a $sign over their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of the problem with this. That's part of the challenge, is that because the crimes are so horrific, parents can't bring themselves to talk about it. But that's what we need to hear more of. And kids that are victimized, they don't want to talk about it. But until we start addressing this by shining a light on all these different crimes that have been committed, it's not going to be appreciated for the magnitude that it is.
Right.
In 2023, and this is from Thorn, which is a national organization that deals with developing technology to fingerprint these images called child sexual abuse material and pull them off the internet. In 2023 alone, just in the United States, there was over 104 million reports of child sexual abuse material on the internet in 1 year. That averages out to about 285,000 a day. I mean, it's staggering, and it's getting worse and worse because we're not educating.
It is a problem that it seems so is so just gigantic in scale. And there is such a pushback from social media companies. One thing that I think parents really need to know is the fact that a predator can get a hold of a youth is not it's not a glitch in the matrix. It's not an accident of design. It's a feature of the design.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you have to realize we have the most advanced technology in the world. And so the idea that it's like, okay, well, we couldn't make technology that filters out different individual people is ridiculous. Like, that's a laughable argument. But what you have to realize is it's not in the social media company's best interest to engage in that segregation. So not only it's not that it's not technically feasible, it's that they would lose money. Right? Because if you want everybody who's interested in looking at young people on your platform, you have to give them access to young people. And if you want young people on your platform that get all kinds of accolades and attention from their peers and from terrible people, you have to allow the people on, right? And you give this integration, like Snapchat, which is notoriously the most predator-friendly app, and we have Telegram and stuff as well. But Snapchat is crazy because you have like Snap Maps and you have all kinds of features of Snapchat that make it addictive and hyper predator-friendly, end-to-end encryption, messages, things of that nature. The thing that's really interesting about Snapchat is everyone knows it's this predator-friendly app, and they make it this like beautiful, bubbly, fun, colorful little thing with like a smiley face on it. And it's literally like the big bag wolf with a popsicle stick mask over his face with like a smiley face on it. It's like, oh my God, that you can get heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, all of this. You can get by prostitutes. You can become sex trafficked. You can engage in sex trafficking. You can do anything you want on Snapchat, but we couch it in this like, oh, fun, connect with your friends thing. That's a feature of the app. This is not an accident. It's not a like, oh shoot, we overlooked this thing. It's like, no. I have a friend who Robert Imhoff. He actually lives in Eagle, but he came on and explained he was working with the Nevada. I think it was like the Las Vegas, some metro police department in Nevada during the time of MySpace, like back in the day, right? And he's very, very tech savvy, and so was helping the detectives in the Nevada area figure out like, okay, who's get more evidence against sex predation and child pornography, things of this nature. But they also started sending MySpace information about people that they had figured out that were they were reporting people that were too young to be on MySpace. Okay. And things got really weird because they're like, hey, we reported all these and like the system's glitchy, right? Like the system they were going on to report was glitchy. And then they like used a different computer, like, oh, this one seems to be working. And then that one would be glitchy. And what they realized is that as they were reporting in an official capacity, information they knew about people that appeared to be with high likelihood not verifying age appropriately, they were getting blocked by MySpace. So MySpace was literally blocking the law enforcement's IP addresses because they did not want any more reports from that law enforcement agency. Now wrap your head around that. You're MySpace. Okay. You're this huge social media. You have law enforcement agencies being like, hey, this is what's happening. This person's not 13, like boom, 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 boom. And you're like, we can either listen to them or we can have them go away. Let's have them go away. Yeah. That's what these industries are doing.
Yeah, and that's scary also because now you have industries where the dollar sign's the bottom line. Right. You have predators where the bottom line is the nudes and victimizing.
And ultimately dollars.
And ultimately dollars.
Right.
And you put those two forces together and you can begin to appreciate the odds are stacked against these kids. Right. One statistic, and this is from Thorne, they do an ongoing study. They monitor about approximately 1,200 kids throughout the year, and ages 9 through 17. And one of the things they found was that for youth who even put those blocks up, 50% of the time these predators are getting around those blocks. So that begins to show you how dedicated these predators are to keeping up with the technology. The minute a new type of block is developed, these predators are working to find a way around that new block. So they are taking on all the motivation and the determination of a professional to get at these kids. So
there's if I may, really fast, there was a case in Nampa. I was talking to the board chair there. And there was a case in Nampa where a predator had made it into a school computer and had come after one of the students in Nampa. So again, how dedicated do you have to be to like find these computers, find out that they're school computers, and find your way into them and start an engagement with one of those kids? And it's like Nampa goes to school every day. They go to work every day trying to make these pieces of technology as safe as humanly possible. It is impossible in the current iteration of technology to make them 100% safe. And when you have millions of people just every day pushing on the walls, trying to get in, trying to get through, eventually people start getting through, especially at scale, right? And even if you have say you got 1 million predators, right? And you have like 100 million school kids with technology. Those 1 million predators, they do not stop. They're like the Terminators. They don't feel fear. They don't feel pain. They don't sleep. They don't eat. Like they just got this. It's their entire day just going after these IP addresses, trying to gain access to these kids.
24/7. 24/7. They never take a break. So keep that in mind. And then these kids are, without any education and their naivete, they are setting themselves up and there's no monitoring whatsoever by the parents. So, the education is absolutely essential. And that's where our thrust is. We're trying to get different venues to realize that they all have a stake and a responsibility in this problem. So, for instance, with the businesses, one thing we're looking at is the problem with, you're talking about all these social media apps,
sure,
trying to put some types of blocks up, but now you go to the businesses that offer open Wi-Fi access in public. So, for instance, Indian Creek Plaza in Caldwell, Walmart, the grocery stores, wherever. These predators lure these kids into these areas where there's no blocks, and they start exchanging all this pornography. And so that's one of the other areas we're looking at, is to find a way to encourage businesses to just put a simple filter system in, so that even if you're offering open Wi-Fi access, these kids won't be victimized when they go out in public.
God, I had never thought about that. That's a really good point.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
So your organization is really focusing in Canyon County and other parts of Idaho in, okay, look, how do we educate people, both young and old, both, just normal civilians and school organizations and business organizations? Like, look, we're all playing a part of this.
Absolutely.
We're all a piece of this. You're either a business offering free Wi-Fi, you're a school handing out technology, you're a parent with a child that has tech for either personal tech or school tech, you're a child that's just happily moving on down your life. What your organization is doing is saying, hey, look, this is a whole community problem. This is a whole participation problem, and we're all going to have to participate if we're going to stop this.
Yep. Yeah, one of the other approaches we're doing, and I can't get into details right now because it's just in the beginning phases of development, but we're looking at a program that will train staff from different businesses and entities in a community to know how to handle a situation when a youth walks in a panic, in an emergency situation. And how to get them the help they need. And I'm going to give you an example of one situation that actually played out, and that was in Caldwell. This was back, in 2021. Actually, a month after we started meeting to bring our first event to the public, this woman walked into the local coffee shop, the Flying M, hotspot in the plaza. And she was in a panic. She walked in, ordered a coffee, sat down, and the owner was watching. And we've worked with this business because they are very supportive of the work we're doing and have helped us out. In fact, the first presentation we had was in this coffee shop. So the woman spills the coffee, and it's all over the table, and she doesn't do anything about it. She's like in this
like a trance.
And the owner walked over and asked her if she was okay. And she went on to explain that she thought she was being followed by a man who had formerly sex trafficked her. And so they escorted her into the back room and then called in the police. And so had they had the training, they probably would have done pretty much the same thing, but not every business would have done that. And there are services that can be brought in right on the spot to help that youth. So for instance, if you have a youth that is walking to school and this predator is following in a vehicle and, tries to lure them to the vehicle, if that youth sees, and a sign goes out, a sign is put out in front of any institution if they've been trained, and that youth sees that sign, they'll know that they can go in there and they can get help for the emergency that they're in. So that's another approach, and that's a community-wide approach because the different businesses will be picked, and with mutual agreement they will be trained, and then those signs will go out, and then youth will be educated too. That's another whole process of it. But that's another way to reach the greater community. So it's businesses, it's the school institution, the educational institutions. We do give presentations to the faith-based organizations, the churches. So it's multi-layered, and it's this problem of sexual predators victimizing, particularly the youth, is not something that can be solved by any one entity. And we've had law enforcement say, we can't do it alone. So it's the community, it's grassroots efforts, it's institutions addressing this and bringing in programs. And we tell these institutions when we work with them, look, we're partnering with you, but ultimately these programs have to be put into place that will stay there because, and you, Matt, and I have talked about this problem is never going away as long as there is the human race and now technology. This issue of sexual predators victimizing people and youth will always be here.
Yeah. Yeah, but that makes it really simple, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
where do I start?
Yeah, but I mean, in reality, it's not a question of should we do something or is it appropriate to do something? It's like drunk driving. It's like, hey, we need drunk driving education. We need drunk driving prevention.
Absolutely.
We need drunk people stopping drunk drivers. We need drunk driving awareness. We need checks and balances. 100%. Full stop, because this is reality. As long as you have alcohol, you're going to have drunk driving. Alcohol in cars. Yeah. That's it. Okay. So we know we have to do that. And I think this is one of those things that has become so prevalent.
Absolutely.
So universal. It's everywhere. It's affecting people left and right. And we need to take a whole community and society approach to look, just like drunk driving. This is something that's here to stay.
Yeah.
We'll never get rid of it. Every single youth is at risk. Every person engaging in the internet is at risk to a varying degree.
Right.
And this type of, human trafficking and extortion scams in that are one thing. With older generations, I have a friend who's an older gal, and she got scammed out of a bunch of money because she thought, she had somebody that she really liked her and she was going to go on, this whole thing. I know multiple people. One is an older gentleman has been getting catfished for years, and there's no convincing him that the situation he's in is a scam. And these types of things are all tied together with internet-based crimes against people.
Yes, they are.
And human trafficking is, again, one that spans youth all the way to adults.
It's a new age.
Yeah.
And the new age actually started before the pandemic, but the pandemic really accelerated it. But I think that's one of the things that that we need to focus on is getting people to realize that they can't look at the internet the same way they did when it first came out.
Right.
It is
like AOL, online. You got mail.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The flip phone.
Yeah, right.
But it's a totally different world. And it's that paradigm shift that needs to be made. And it seems to be, there's a lot of resistance to making that paradigm shift. But in the end, and this is the irony of the whole thing. If people get educated, this won't be as much of a problem because we can get on top of it. You'll never be able to eradicate it, but in many ways you'll have control over it because you'll know how to keep those in your lives, those people in your lives who you love, those minors, those children, young adults. Remember, the brain doesn't fully mature until mid-20s. So an 18-year-old, half matured, they too still need to be watched over. And so when we take control of this situation, we can start to at least take a deep breath and realize that we're on the right track and that we're turning it around. Until we do that, it's just going to keep growing.
Well, Deborah, look, you have a lot of things in the works. You got some irons in the fire. I got some irons in the fire.
Yes.
We need to keep this conversation going.
Yes.
I really appreciate you coming in today. Let's meet in another, let's say 4 months, 3 months. I want to hear about the different meetings and presentations and collaborations that you're engaging in in school and community efforts. I have some cool stuff that hopefully we'll be reporting in a couple months too. So let's keep this going. Let's keep working for Idaho. Thank you for everything you're doing for Idaho and for the youth.
Thank you, Matt, too. We really appreciate it. We look forward to working with you.
Awesome. Thank you.